Take care. It's okay. It's all right. It's available and online as well.
You was asking a question?
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying in terms of the inconsistencies that you see, especially from a human perspective.
Yeah.
I also understand that you said God is self-sufficient. But in the Bible and in the Quran as well, God always uses prophets to help spread his word or to essentially do his bidding. So how is that an example of self-sufficiency?
Yeah. There may be no creation and still God is self-sufficient. He doesn't need anyone. He sends, this is called mechanisms. You see, just to give you an example. Imagine now this gentleman said, God spoke to me personally to tell you that you need to give all your possessions to me.
What would you
God spoke to him personally. Yeah? Rather than through the agency of prophets and messengers, God directly spoke to him.
Yeah.
Right? Would you give all your possessions and your bank accounts and everything? Because if that was the case where everyone's claiming we have individual revelation, it's going to be a problem. So what God has done is given us an efficient, effective mechanism in which the message can be given to us, to reach us through prophets and messengers.
So he's using other people, essentially.
Yeah, he's guiding us through different ways.
Why is he doing that? That's the question. Why?
Because he loves us and cares for us. Because one of his names is Al-Wadud, the loving one. The one of his names is most merciful, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the one who's gracious and merciful. So these attributes are being reflected on his creation. To give you an example, if you are a painter, painting manifests.
Okay.
If God is a creator, creation manifests.
Okay.
His attribute is manifesting into reality.
But the claim of self-sufficiency could be argued against when he's using prophets to spread his word and to do his bidding.
I just told you, God could simply, in fact, God has given us several mechanisms, but people sometimes abuse these mechanisms. Like, we believe that every child is born in a state of fitrah, a state of disposition, natural disposition, to know God, to thank God and be grateful to God and to worship God alone. This is the natural disposition. But what happens is the immediate environment, the family, friends, they influence and condition that child to be something other than on this natural state of belief.
Okay.
So, that could have been okay. But there are people out there with their own
Objectives and agendas.
agendas, because human beings, they're free agents in a limited degree. You see, some people want to, I want more wealth, I want more money, I want more cars, I want more women, and so on, even if it means to rob, to steal, to kill, and so on, isn't it? Unjustly. So these feelings are there which makes up the human beings. So because of this kind of greed, envy and ego and so on and so forth, these intrinsic belief that is there may be clouded. That's why God employs other mechanisms from out of his mercy, sending prophets and messengers specifically for one good reason, giving them proof and evidence so that mankind would not have any evidence against God in the hereafter. They have no evidence against him. When they come, they establish the evidence. For example, when we establish the evidence, for example, a crime has committed and you just give them direct evidence of the crime without a shadow of a doubt, then you can't say, oh, this didn't take place, or you're not guilty, and so on. Prophets and messengers, they come and establish the truth of God and the guidance with evidence, so that human beings cannot say, oh, I didn't know that you're a prophet of God. So they have to accept them. But accepting is simply still not okay. Doesn't Satan know God exists? Yeah, but still Satan became disobedient. So it's not about knowing the evidence, it's also submitting in line with this evidence and surrendering yourself to God. Satan didn't do that, so his acknowledgement isn't sufficient and enough.
But if God is all powerful, wouldn't he be able to do it in such a way that he wouldn't need to use a mechanism?
I just told you.
You've told me why he uses mechanisms.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, should he be able to circumvent that reason because he's all powerful? If I'm all powerful, I need a hammer to bang a nail. Yeah? I'm not all powerful. If I was all powerful, I wouldn't need a hammer to bang a nail.
Okay.
That's the point that I'm making.
Sure. So it's like asking, isn't God all powerful to prevent a murder, a rape taking place? It's like, imagine now someone wants to stab you and butterflies. Someone wants to slap you, flowers. Look, if God took away the human freedom, then you're not an agent of freedom with free will. You're like a robot. God has given us this agency of free will, and that's why he allows these things happen. Likewise, he set up a mechanism in which his guidance can be received, and people can accept this guidance or reject it. God says so. If God so wanted, everyone would have believed. That's what God says in the Quran, exactly as you're saying. But he's given people chance to use their own intellect to accept him willingly or to reject him. Based on that, they will be rewarded either with a place of pleasure, happiness, joy, bliss and tranquility, or a place of torment, suffering and pain and punishment. People need to know that yes, a gift that we have, the gift of free will, is an important gift. And when we use it wisely, we can then await the promise of God that he will give us paradise. You see, look, my friend, what's your name?
Max.
Max.
Yeah.
Max. God could have created human beings with free will, and he could have chosen the ones who would use their free will in a good way and only create them and put them in paradise, right?
Okay.
Avoiding, he's all powerful, avoiding the need to create human beings who'd use their, because he knows the future, who'd use their free will wrongly and they will end up going to hell. So instead of creating them, he could have just created human beings with free will, but only those who would do the works which will make them go to paradise. Imagine now these people go to paradise. Would they even know that they had this free will? They wouldn't know that they had free will. They're in there. So how is one given a free will and appreciated that gift of free will? It's only when, imagine now, you have no sensation of pain, suffering at all whatsoever. Would you even know what joy, goodness is? If, for example, there's no concept of darkness, would you even know what light is and brightness is? You would not even appreciate. That's why the contrast is given, knowledgeable and not knowledgeable, the good and the bad. When we look at this contrast, we understand what good is because we understand what bad is.
No, so I understand your point on free will.
Yeah.
But my point was essentially him using agents to express his view and to do his bidding questions his self-sustainability.
How?
That is the point.
How does it?
Someone could look at it and, like myself, and then say, why did he use that person? You can come with your view, and as you explained eloquently, and then someone else could say, no, the reason why he's used him is because he's had to use him.
Not necessarily. If you're a manager and you delegate to somebody, is the manager self-deficient?
So in that sense, there is
Why you make a distinction now?
Because there's
If a manager employs and he delegates that you must do it, he's self-deficient. Because what you're saying, because God sent agents, he's not self-sufficient. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so the difference when we're talking about a manager, we're not just talking about. So first and foremost, who is a manager? I can't just say she's a manager. We're talking about first as an organization.
Just say generally.
No. There's no such thing as general when we talk about a manager. Because I have a manager in my workplace. You have a manager in your workplace. But your manager can't delegate in my workplace.
No. In your workplace, your manager delegates to you.
Within the framework of our organization, my manager has the power.
It's very simple. A manager in your workplace, you're under him, he delegates to you.
Yes.
Or your foreman delegates to you. Is he self-sufficient? That's the answer. That's the question.
Within the boundaries of my workplace, my manager is self-sufficient.
He is self-sufficient.
He is self-sufficient because he could have come to me directly. And there's no argument because of the policy that's written within my organisation.
I think you're missing the point. What I'm saying, you're saying
Yeah.
that God is not self-sufficient because he
I'm
has
not
to
saying
use...
that God is not self-sufficient.
Okay.
What I'm saying to you, he said that God is self-sufficient,
Yeah.
and he used that as part of his argument. And what I'm trying to say is, this is a matter of perspective, yeah, and a matter of faith. Because many people could look at it from a different perspective and say, well, if he is self-sufficient, then he wouldn't have needed to do what he's done.
There's no
You
need.
tend-
It's not.
But
Matt,
that's
it's not about he needs. He's put a mechanism. For example, he could have created at once everything, but we are told in the Quran, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. There's a process that he's employed. He could have just done just like that,
Yeah.
everything. He could have created human beings without making them into babies and
Exactly.
developing and so on, right?
Exactly.
So you can question everything,
Yes.
but what you're not understanding is the wisdom in these steps and transformations and these processes. God employs from his wisdom processes for a reason. Okay? We may not be eloquently able to explain to you certain reasons, but the reasons are there from his wisdom. So when the example I gave you about guidance to human beings, God sends guidance through various ways. In your dreams, guidance through other people, guidance through prophets and messengers, guidance through your own self, that what comes to you and so on, right? God inspires you. So there are many ways, but the full proof, the ones that people cannot have opportunity of disputing, is when God sends prophets and messengers to establish the evidence. That's the mechanism he has chosen. If you now ask, out of all these mechanisms, what mechanism would have been the best to guide people individually? I give an example. God speaks to them individually. How does he know that he is speaking to God? God convinced him, right? Now there will be someone with free will says, God convinced me, saying, all of you are wrong. God told me, all of you are wrong, you have to follow me. And in fact, I am God's prophet, you have to follow me. If that was the mechanism, individual guidance from God directly, you have to accept that and you have to follow him. It'll be chaos and corruption. That method isn't a very good method, a mechanism.
So, in your understanding or your belief, has that method ever been used before? Has God ever spoken directly to someone?
God has spoken directly to his prophets and messengers. Prophets and messengers, so that they can then be the agents to convey and disseminate that message. That's what God does.
Okay, so he's spoken directly in some cases, and in some cases
No,
he's speaking...
he speaks directly to certain people who he raises and he chooses and he makes them ready so that they can then deliver this message so people have no excuse accepting it. For example, imagine you go to a doctor and you found out that he did not even pass a medical exam ever in his life. He didn't perform any operations. All the certificates are false. The moment you find out, would you go and say, I've come here for a heart bypass?
No.
You wouldn't. You wouldn't trust that man or woman, doctor, for this purpose. But if you had no reason to doubt that this gentleman is a qualified medical doctor and his medical profession is quality control and governed by a profession called GMC, General Medical Council, and he's liable and for any misconduct that he's doing. He's got a certificate. He went to school, medical college. He got a degree and got all this training. You have no reason to. He will happily say yes. Do the operation, doctor.
1 second.
So,
sorry, just before you go on.
But I might forget the point I'm making.
Yeah.
So when God chooses certain individuals called prophets and messengers, he makes them, he raises them in a way so that when they come and deliver that message, people will accept them easily. They would know that this person has never spoken.
That's the point I want to say. So did God always choose for his prophets? Did he always choose people who are of good standing?
No, God chooses. God is the one who chooses on whom he will place the message to deliver to people. You cannot say, God, make me a prophet. God decides.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Fine.
But the example that you've given, so you've got a doctor who's regulated by the GMC and has got all the certificates, yeah? This is someone of good standing. And therefore, when he goes to deliver the operation, he will be accepted, yeah? That's the example that you've given. So are you saying similarly, when God chose prophets, that all of those people were of a decorated good standing in the same example that you, in the same way as the example that you've given?
Yes, and that is why the problem starts when individuals with critical thinking, they read certain books called the scripture, and they find prophets and messengers sleeping in their own daughters, getting drunk, doing all these things, and they lose hope in believing in such prophets. Because how can they believe in a prophet with such a heinous character, such a bad character? We say these are buhtanun azim, these are indeed a great lie against the prophets and messengers that people have accused them of. God's prophets and messengers, God chose them, the noble, the noblest, the truthful, the most truthful, the honest, the most upright. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, the final messenger, he was known in his community as as-sadiq al-amin, the truthful one, the most reliable one, the trustworthy one. So at one point when God appointed him as the prophet, so he went into a mountain, a Safa. Is it a Safa? Anyway, he went into the mount and he called something like Ya Sabaha. Yeah, they're calling styles, right? They used to call. Just like in early parts of a few centuries ago, people used to ring church bell and everyone would go and say what's happening because of community alert. Now it's like, fire bell alarms and everyone goes down. Some kind of mechanism people had. So his community, his people, they all left their work, their job, their study, whatever it might be, and then they gathered in the beneath the mountain, right? This hill. This is what's wrong, what's happening. He says, if I told you there's an army waiting to attack you, would you believe me? He says, yes, of course we'll believe you. We've never known you to be a liar. You're always truthful. They testify. So he says, okay, now I'm telling you that God has made me a prophet. Worship none but God and so on. They didn't want to believe, some of them, so are you, right? But they testify. So what he's saying is, from historical accounts, we know that people testified of his truthfulness. Even his enemies or people of other faith community, like a Jewish person, would leave, like a shield, for example, in his own possession. Because he was known to be reliable, trustworthy, that he would not make khiyana, he would not break his promise or contract that he has given. He will return what has been entrusted on him.
Was that always the case with all of the prophets? Was there ever a prophet who had to prove the power of God to the people?
The prophets were raised like that. That's the default position of the prophets. That God raised them with the most noble of character and standards of a human being. That's why people, when the prophets came and said, speak the truth, they will say, yes, I should speak the truth. Imagine now someone who's known to be a liar and says, speak the truth, my friends. The one who's always a liar, telling you to speak the truth, would you follow him? Would you obey him? Would you even listen to him? Of course not. But the one who is truthful, and he says, speak the truth, because in it there is lots of benefit, in it there's lots of good, rather than lying. Lying has lots of bad things and bad consequences. You would listen to them. Good advice from someone who is pious and righteous. So prophets were like that. So God chose those prophets, in a way, so that they can deliver the message and people would have no excuse in saying, but I doubt your character though. Are you really telling me the truth about God?
But people didn't always believe them.
The reason people didn't believe in them is because of what? Not because of their character, because of their ego, because of their bias. It's like, oh, you're telling me to worship one God and abandon my 360 million gods, or 50 gods or 20 gods, because that's my business. When during the pilgrimage times people come and bring me all this money and goods and so on, you're telling me that I have to abandon all of them? No more business. So it will impact their economy. It will impact their finances. It will impact their social status. It will impact their business. Many factors prevented people or prevents people from accepting the truth. For example, even today, they say, oh, if I become a Muslim now, I have to always speak the truth. I cannot go and sleep around. I cannot cheat.
Cannot drink.
You see, what makes them happy and joyful, like robbing people, because it gives them, that prevents them from accepting the truth.
We're rebellious by nature.
Yeah, it creates a barrier. But my whole point is, basically, everything you've described to me is a matter of perspective. It's your own view. For example, when I've said to you that, the example that you gave was, like a doctor, for example, an accredited person. I say, was it always people who were accredited? You said to me that actually it was always people that were righteous, okay, and known to be righteous.
Okay.
But when he spoke to many people didn't believe. At that point, you then told me it was the ego of those people.
Some people would not believe regardless of the evidence.
This is what you're telling me.
No, I'm telling you that regardless of the evidence, some people still not believe. Imagine now, I want to make you believe in something. Let me recount a story very quickly. I was in the jury service once. I didn't like it. I don't want ever to be in the jury service, right? The system is really unjust, in my opinion, giving, the judgment making on individuals who are not qualified to decide someone's guilty or not, when it should be on the hands or shoulder of qualified people. Anyway, so we had an individual gentleman. He didn't want to agree that the person is innocent. And we asked him, why so? The evidence is there. I hope this is the same, because either it's the opposite way, innocent or guilty, right? It's a long time ago. He says, no, because my conscience tells me that he's guilty. I said, look, even though we provide you the evidence, look, the video clip, he wasn't even there, it was someone else. He says, no, my conscience tells me he's guilty. So you cannot convince some people because they are driven by other than evidence. Sometimes information is not even sufficient to update your behavior and your knowledge to do things. For example, people smoke. Yeah? What does it say in the cigarette packet?
Cancer kills.
Smoking kills.
Yeah, smoking
causes cancer.
Yeah.
Do they not understand what it says? They do, but they still smoke. Okay? So it's not information that is missing. It's not who has provided the information that is not understood. It's coming from the medical people. It's coming from the government and the Department of Health.
So people have their own reasons,
There could be other reasons to disbelieve or not to believe.
So when could not someone say the same thing about Christianity? And say people have other reasons not to believe in Christianity, such as they look in the Bible, they see something that doesn't make sense to them, and then they say, no, this is a reason, because really and truly the Bible doesn't want me to have sex outside of marriage and all of the to maintain the
correct. Agreed.
Similar with Islam. I may reject it for whatever reason. This religion,
because it says you can do sacrifice and Hajj, and I'm a vegetarian, so I can't accept Islam. People make this kind of excuses.
My point is, all of this comes down to a matter of faith.
A matter of what?
A matter of faith.
Personal decisions based on what? Not on truth, but based on whims and desires. This is what God wants us to leave aside, your personal whims and desires, and submit to the truth. That is the standard.
But even when we put aside our personal, desires,
you can't.
If you do, then you'll accept the truth.
Okay, and then you will accept the truth. But then the truth will become a matter of perspective to that individual.
No. When you recognize the truth, it's no longer a perspective. It's the reality. Truth is objective. Objective truth. Truth is not subjective, my friend. Truth is objective. So when you recognize the truth, the objective nature of this reality of the truth, you submit to it. That's the only thing, the natural thing to do. But when people do not want to, because of their whims and desires and other biases, they will be accountable and they would not be able to justify their disbelief in God or in Islam or in the disbelief in the Quran or in the disbelief in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because you see, salvation is when man zuhziha 'anil nar wa udkhila al-jannah faqad faz. Whoever has saved themselves from the fire and has entered into heaven. That's the ultimate success. Salvation and success is saving yourself from the hellfire, and making yourself enter Jannah or paradise or heaven. So if people really want to have eternal life in a place of joy and tranquility and happiness, let them follow the truth and submit and surrender to the truth. But if they want to follow a path which will lead them to hellfire, then let them be ready for that, because there will be a time when the judgment day comes, your own hands, your own mouth, your own legs will speak against you. You will say, well, how? How is my skin? How is my limb speaking? God says, God has given us the ability to speak now. So that I walked to there. I did this. Like if you kill someone unjustly and so on and so forth. You don't have to say. The records will be provided of everything you do. We believe there are scribes recording every details of our good actions and bad actions, right? With us. They're with us. Just like, it's so easy to understand now. In your mobile phone, you can record the video and you can have it there and the camera's recording. So we have angels recording all our good deeds and bad deeds, and they will then present these actions and you will see them. You will not be able to deny. This is where you did bad things. You lied, you cheated, you robbed, you killed, you raped, you massacred, whatever. Or you did these good things. You helped the poor. You gave charity. You spoke truth. You were kind to a person. You fed the poor. All good things, right? They will be there. And you believed and you worshipped God and you were grateful to Him. You didn't ascribe any partners to. Everything will be presented and your deeds will be put on a scale. The good and the bad. That day is a tremendous day. When in that day, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنٌ يُغْنِيهِ. In that day, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ. On that day, the man will flee from his friends, from his brother, because his brother cannot save him. From his وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ. From his mother and father. وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ. From his companions, from his mates, from his children. Because on that day, imagine now, if something happens now here, you would die to save your children. You would give up own life to save your children. But on that day, you will flee from them. You will flee from your parents. You will flee from your children, because no one can save you. In that day, the terrible day, because you will be in front of God, accountant, and be ready to be judged. So this is something that is such a tremendous day that nothing will be happening. In that day, you will see. If you have done any good, you will see it. Do you know the ayah of the Quran? شَرًّا يَرَى and خَيْرًا يَرَى. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. Whoever has done an atom weight of good, like a good, small, like a small ant, like an atom, a mustard seed, whatever, the smallest thing. If you have done that good, you shall see it. If you have done the smallest thing, an atom weight of evil, you should see it. And God is لَيْسَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. He is not unjust in any way or shape to His slaves, to His creation. So in that day, justice will be done with utmost justice. No one can save apart from God Himself. That's why in our mats, I know you're ready to depart maybe, we pray at least 17 times a day with this Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. I've just quoted 2 or 3 ayah from first chapter of the Quran, that we say, you are the owner, the king, the master of the day of judgment. To you we worship, and from you we ask for help, because there was no one to help us on that day. And we say, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, show us, establish us, guide us on the true path. The path of those that you are happy with, you are pleased with, not the path of those who went astray or they received anger. So this is the path that we need to follow, my friends.